Welcome to Weather Extra. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Jillian Grace. Powerful storm systems impacted the nation last week, bringing feet of snow and record rain out west, hail and tornadoes into the south, and the first nor'easter of the winter season across upstate New York into New England. Today on Weather Extra, we're going to cover it all, but for right now, we're going to begin our coverage along the Pacific coast as unimaginable scenes unfold after another very wet week. Another significant atmospheric river event slammed onto the west coast last week, hitting the state of California the hardest yet again. This is on top of an abnormally wet and snowy start to the year. This past atmospheric river event was number 11 of the season. Additional record rain fell, which left behind a trail of mudslides and flooded roads and neighborhoods, forcing many California residents to evacuate. Powerful wind gusts knocked out power to hundreds of thousands and toppled trees throughout the state. A wind gust of 77 miles per hour was reported in San Francisco, which ended up breaking some of the glass windows of a 52-story building. Local law enforcement had to also shut down Bay Area bridges as strong winds blew over trucks and trailers. And even at one point, San Francisco's airport had to order a ground stop for all planes due to those dangerous wind gusts. Torrential rains pushed rivers out of their banks and even caused a levee to breach in Monterey County, flooding local neighborhoods. Massive landslides were sent crashing into homes, beach erosion taking place along the Pacific coast, which also forced people to evacuate their homes and in some extreme cases, tearing them down. Southern California got hit hard with record rain. More than half a dozen cities broke a daily record rainfall amounts, including the city of Los Angeles. The recent rain now gives Los Angeles more rain this fall and winter than the city of Seattle. Not only was record rain falling across the state, but record snow did too. Some across the Sierra Nevada mountain range saw 114 to 144 inches of new snow in just the last week alone. Unimaginable amounts of snow covered towns, leaving behind incredible scenes of cars and buildings buried up to 12 to 15 feet of snow. Many residents stuck inside their homes for more than a week. Take a look at this video of one man digging his way out of more than 12 feet of snow to get access to his home.
Walking into my house right now.
And look at these insane images out of a ski resort in Bear Valley. Employees say that 623 inches of snow has fallen this season. The resort recently shared a photo showing a member of the ski patrol standing completely level with the ski lift line that typically stands 35 feet off the ground. But what does all this rain and snow mean for California's drought? Well, the latest drought monitor for the Golden State was released this past Thursday, and it shows that almost half of the state is seeing absolutely no drought. And to realize how much of a change that is, just 3 months ago, all of the state was seeing some form of drought. The state's snowpack sits at more than 200% above the average that they typically see, and records are getting close to being broken. One local manager who does snow surveys across the state says this year's snowpack is one of the largest they've seen on record. But despite all of this rain and snow, there's still a long way to go before the entire state exits the long-term drought. After pummeling the state of California, that same powerful storm system went east and brought a round of heavy rain, large hail, and damaging winds across the south, including us right here in Central Texas. Before the storm system arrived in the Lone Star State, it dumped heavy rain across the Four Corners region. Water quickly filled up creeks and rivers. Flood warnings were issued across parts of Arizona and Utah. Floodwaters even rose into streets and parks. Some water was high enough to completely shut down roads. After moving through the Four Corners region during the middle of the week, that strong storm system swept through the state of Texas, bringing dangerous weather conditions, especially across North and Central Texas Thursday afternoon and evening, which prompted the National Weather Service to issue a tornado watch for areas near and east of I-35. Multiple tornado warnings were issued across the Dallas and Fort Worth metro areas as storms developed, which caused tornado sirens to blare across the metroplex. Severe thunderstorms ripped through, leaving behind a path of destruction. The National Weather Service received over 100 reports of wind and hail damage across Texas and Oklahoma. Those storms dropped large and damaging hail, with over 80 of those reports being issued due to reported hail damage. Some hailstones falling from the sky were between 2 and 3 inches in diameter. There were many reports of golf ball to tennis ball size hail across the region. A resident in Palo Pinto County said hail up to the size of tennis balls was falling from the sky. Hail damaged cars and even broke windows on many area homes. The Dallas area now leads the nation with nearly 100 large hail reports since the start of the year. Storms also brought strong and damaging wind gusts. A nearby car dealership in the Dallas area took on heavy wind damage and lost part of its roof after an intense storm passed through. And an apartment complex in Irving, Texas, sustained significant damage when a severe thunderstorm blew through that was likely the result of a tornado. The National Weather Service out of Fort Worth has confirmed at least one tornado in the Irving area on Thursday, with a preliminary rating of an EF1 with peak wind speeds up to 110 miles per hour. Additional damage surveys were being done across the Metroplex throughout this past weekend. Check out this video of a reported funnel cloud over the downtown Fort Worth area late Thursday afternoon. That was the same storm that likely went on to produce that tornado. Here in Central Texas, we mostly saw hail, heavy rain, and strong wind gusts as those storms moved through. We had numerous reports of P to near golf ball size hail. Widespread hail fell in Bell and Coryell County. Check out this video of hail falling in Coppers Cove. You can see the large hail falling quickly from the sky, covering yards and roads. Thanks to Cindy Treadway for sending this video to us. And Thazy Raphael sent us this video of the stormy skies that were moving into the Kempner area late Thursday afternoon. The other major weather story across the nation last week was that powerful nor'easter that slammed into upstate New York and across the New England states, causing government officials to declare state of emergencies. A powerful nor'easter slammed into the Northeast at the start of last week, which went on to unleash ferocious winds, heavy snow, blizzard-like conditions, and flooding rain. The storm was so far the most widespread, impactful weather event of the entire winter season for the Northeast. This powerful storm led to delayed travel both in the air and across roadways from New York up into the New England states. Dangerous to impossible travel conditions were seen across that region as heavy, wet snow fell, some seeing accumulation rates of up to 2 inches per hour. As much as 3 feet of snow fell in the highest elevations across Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York. The highest snow totals were recorded in Vermont, where 40 inches fell. Coastal flooding was also a concern as the nor'easter tracked along the New England coastline. Tides were rising 2 to 3 feet above historical average for the middle of the month. High winds gusting over 50 to 60 miles per hour in many areas led to downed trees and reduced visibility due to the heavy snow that was falling. The combination of heavy snow and those powerful winds managed to knock out power to more than 300,000, leaving those Americans without heat during the first significant nor'easter of the season. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Today marks the last day of winter. Spring officially kicks off tomorrow, March 20th. Now the spring equinox, or the official start to spring, is at 4:24 Central Time. Now on that day, the northern and southern hemisphere receive roughly equal amounts of sunlight, which is about 12 hours and 7 minutes for us in Central Texas. And as spring nears, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, released its spring outlook this past Thursday. So let's dive into that. Well, the outlook says the abnormally wet winter out west cut California's extreme drought. And this spring, storms combined with melting snowpack could bring major flooding to the state. The risk for flooding is also high along the Mississippi River from Minneapolis to St. Louis. Forecasters say the extreme drought will remain in the southern high plains. That's New Mexico, Oklahoma, and us here in Texas. But Florida's drought could end in the next few months, and higher than normal temperatures are expected for the south and eastern U.S. And NOAA also stated earlier this month that La Nina has officially ended and El Nino is on the way. El Nino is associated with a band of warm water in the Pacific Ocean, which impacts weather patterns around the globe. It generally increases hurricane activity in the Pacific, but has the opposite effect in the Atlantic. We also usually see a spike in temperatures with El Nino. 2022 was the warmest La Nina on record. Forecasters say the next year or two will likely climb even higher on the list of hottest years on record. And for more details on exactly what El Nino is and how it impacts our weather in the Lone Star State, we bring in meteorologist Sean Bellafury. Sean.
For the last 3 winters in a row, we have seen La Nina conditions in the Pacific Ocean, and now we are going into an El Nino. Last week, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration released their latest forecast for what could be an El Nino fall and winter. And what do we mean when we talk about El Nino and La Nina? It's all sea surface temperature based in the Pacific Ocean. Normally, those trade winds blow east to west, and they can sometimes push warmer surface waters away from South America and towards Asia. But sometimes we get kind of the reverse happening. The trade winds can weaken, which doesn't push that water off towards the west, and sometimes it could even reverse direction, pushing warmer sea surface temperatures towards South America. We take a look at a very specific region of the Pacific Ocean. It's called the ENSO 3.4 region. It's this box right here, and you can see, of course, there are some warm sea surface temperatures. Of course, the farther north you go, the colder those sea surface temperatures are, but you have to look at the temperature anomaly in this 3.4 region. And notice it's not really colored in. That means that the temperatures are about average. You kind of see some warmer sea surface temperatures farther off to the east, and that is why we're expecting to go into an El Nino soon. Now, currently, from April to June, it's about an 83% chance of neutral conditions. You saw those sea surface temperature anomalies, which really weren't showing anything. But by the time we get to August, September, October, the heart of hurricane season, 61% chance of seeing an El Nino and nearly no chance of a La Nina. Now, during hurricane season, that typically means a slower hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. Higher wind shear helps to rip apart storms. And yeah, of course, we can get some impacts from hurricanes here in central Texas, but the majority of our El Nino impacts come in winter as the Pacific jet stream sends clouds, which keep our temperatures kind of warmer, but more importantly, rain our way. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafury, KWTX News 10.
Coming up next on Weather Extra is this week's Degrees of Science. On the other side of this break, we'll hear more on astronomers' groundbreaking discovery on a planet known as the Forbidden Planet. We'll be right back.
Welcome into this week's Degrees of Science. Exoplanets have been in the news a lot here over the last few months, and we've got an expert to talk to us this week, Dr. Aurora Kesley, who works with NASA and studies exoplanets and learns more about them. So, Aurora, thanks for joining us. First off, for people that may not know, since they're popping up in the news a lot, what exactly are exoplanets?
Yeah, great question. So exoplanets are just any planet that does not orbit our sun. So in our solar system, we have 8 planets. They all orbit the sun. And when you look up at the night sky, there's going to be tons of other stars up there. And any planets that orbit those stars are exoplanets.
The new TESS mission, what all goes on with that, and how do y'all use that to discover these planets?
Yeah, so the TESS mission is the current exoplanet finding mission that's up in the sky right now. It's a NASA mission, and it's a satellite that was launched in 2018, and it's kind of the next step after Kepler. So Kepler was our first exoplanet finding mission, and it just stared at one point in the sky and looked for planets in that little small area of space. And the difference with TESS is we now want to find the closest exoplanets to us, so the exoplanets that are orbiting the closest stars. And so instead of staring at one little small space of sky, TESS is looking for planets around the entire night sky. So everywhere there's a star, TESS is going to look to see if there's a planet there.
Tell us about the discovery of the Forbidden Planet that was found.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting new discovery. So all stars are not like the sun. Stars actually range in size, and the most common type of star is actually much smaller than the sun. So anywhere between 10% the size of the sun and 50% the size of the sun. And these small stars are called red dwarf stars. And the forbidden planet orbits one of these small red dwarf stars, but the planet is actually really big. It's bigger than Jupiter, just slightly bigger than Jupiter. So the star is really small, but the planet is really big. And our current theories for how planets form said that this really shouldn't happen very often. And when we look around most red dwarf stars, we do see much smaller planets. And this is kind of the enigma, the forbidden planet, because it's really big and around a really small star, which is hard to do.
How exactly in the beginning phases of stars and all that, how do the planets form around those stars?
Yeah, so stars and planets kind of form at the same time. So stars form from gas and dust that's kind of floating around, and it's clumped up in dense little areas. And when a star starts to collapse, the gas and the dust start spinning and heating up, and the central region will become the star, and any gas and dust in the surrounding region will kind of form a disk that the planets will form out of. And so smaller stars we see usually have smaller disks, and the planets are going to form out of all of the material in this disk. So dust grains and pebbles start sticking to each other and eventually form the planets. And so there's just less material around these small stars to form planets out of. And so it's hard to make really big planets in small disks around small stars.
How cool is it for you to be kind of the building blocks or first baby steps of a really cool new field we're going to be hearing a lot about here over the next several decades?
Yeah, I feel really lucky. It's amazing. I mean, exoplanets were discovered after I was born. The first exoplanet was 1995. Now we have more than 5,000 planets. And I feel like the last 20 years was discovering exoplanets. So we didn't know if any existed. We found them. We now know that they exist and that they're plentiful. And I think we're just at the very start of the next age of exoplanet science, which is characterizing them, trying to figure out what they're made of and what different conditions on different planets look like. So I feel super lucky that I get to be working in this field kind of at the forefront of this science. So yeah, it's a really exciting time.
To hear more about NASA's work with exoplanets and the forbidden planets, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube or go to KWTX.com/degrees of science. Weather Extra returns right after this quick break. Stick with us. Millions suffer from seasonal allergies in the U.S., and a new report finds climate change is likely leading to a longer pollen season and worsening allergies. And today's Health Minute, Mandy Gaither has more on the data and what you can do to protect yourself.
Spring is in the air, and if you're already overwhelmed by allergies, you're not alone.
The pollen is going to be in the air even longer, and it's happening earlier as well.
According to a new Climate Central report, weather and climate trends are worsening allergy season. The data shows earlier spring and longer periods of freeze-free days for parts of the U.S. have meant that plants have had more time to flower and release allergy-inducing pollen.
What happens in a warmer world, you have a longer growing season. And so these areas with the green dots, this shows 60 or more days change with the longer growing season.
The CDC says people with respiratory illnesses like asthma may be more sensitive to pollen. Exposure has been linked to asthma attacks and more people being admitted to the hospital for respiratory problems. To reduce your exposure when pollen counts are high, start taking allergy medicine early. Close doors and windows and avoid outdoor activity in the early morning when pollen counts are highest. Remove clothes you've worn outside and shower to get the pollen off of your skin and hair. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
In this week's Moment of Science, Dan Smith finds out if being under the weather is really because of the weather after all. Take a look.
Bundle up or you'll catch a cold. We've all heard it from our parents and probably told it to our kids, but even if it's right there in the name, how does temperature really affect how often we get sick? Cold and flu season peaks between December and February, with adults getting sick an average of 2 to 3 times a year and kids 5 or more. It's a wide range, but it depends a lot on the strain of virus, your immune system, whether little Sally covers her mouth and washes her hands. The main reason for catching a cold in the winter is simply people tend to stay indoors to avoid the chill, and as we've all become very aware of these past couple years, social distancing is just a little hard to do within a family. More people, more chances for exposure, more virus to spread. Proximity is not the only culprit though. Humidity goes way down in the winter since there's much less moisture in the air, and when you warm that air up indoors, that percentage becomes even lower, even if you have the same general moisture content. Runny noses are a bit of a signature for catching a cold, but that humidity will tend to dry up the mucus in your nose, which would normally help act as a barrier toward inhaling the virus. Sunlight also plays a role. At a time when everyone needs more vitamin D to stave off infection and inflammation, most of us get a lot less of it compared to summertime. So that's a lot of evidence against the cold causes cold adage, but hold your horses. When we step out into extreme temperatures, our bodies are placed under more stress. Cortisol levels rise when we're stressed, and that can suppress our immune system, making us more vulnerable. If you've ever felt more sick during or just after finals week, that could be why. Our blood vessels also constrict because of cortisol, and recent studies suggest that narrower path slows down white blood cells along with blood flow in general, making them less effective at combating the virus already in your system. However, more stressed people in daily life are less likely for cortisol to be effective, and it throws their inflammatory response into chaos anyway. Some of our infected cells will actually self-destruct to limit viral spread, but that's less likely in colder cells, and the virus forms a harder shell around itself in the winter, making it harder to kill. Not much of a conclusion there, but all of this to say, going outside, catching some rays when you can while bundled up to stay warm in this beautiful green screen forest is your safest bet to get through any cold and flu season. For this week's Moment of Science, I'm Dan Smith.
And even though tomorrow marks the first day of spring, we'll still have that winter feel around. But don't worry, we do have some spring-like warmth returning later this week. But all right, that's all we have for you for this week's Weather Extra. We're back again next weekend with another half hour of weather and science. We'll see you then. Have a great week.